Okay, so on our test we had some issues with the tables. This was one of the most common issues. I think a lot of people got confused because in the first half of the test we had actual functions, like we had f of x equals something, and we had, I think it was like 3x plus 4, and we had g of x equals x minus 2, I believe, or 2x minus 5, maybe it was 2x minus 5. We had something like that. So then when it came to the tables, when I was asking like f of 1 or f of g of x of 1 or f of g of 1 or whatever, I think a lot of people plugged it into these original formulas, but these formulas had nothing to do with the tables. So the tables are completely different from the formulas in the top part of the test. So we're going to have a retest on this portion of the test only. Everybody did pretty well on plugging into regular composites, but they had issues with the table. So if we had, for instance, so one of your problems might have been, let's say you had f of g of 2. Okay, so this is a question, this is composite, but we're not going to use an actual equation, we're only just going to use the table. So before, what we said is you did the inside first, right? We would find our g of 2, so we do our g of 2, and then whatever we get for there, we plug into our f, right? We're not plugging in f of 2, we're plugging in the output from our g of 2. So your output becomes your input. Well, in this case, so in this table, I've color-coded it so you could kind of have a better idea of what we're looking at, because this apparently was confusing as well. Okay, you notice the top row is all purple, that's your x. Those are all your x values. F of x in red, that's the value of your function if you plug in the purple value, right? So like in the first column, f of negative 4 would be 5. Right, negative 4 is your x, and then you start at your x value and then you go straight down to the function. So in our problem here we have g of 2, so that means what we're going to do is we're going to start at 2 in the x row, that's here, and then we're going to go down to the g. Well, the g is the green one, so our g of 2 is negative 2. So then that negative 2 is our output, so we have a negative 2 here. And that's what goes into here. So then what happens is we start all over. So we go back up to our purple, we find our negative 2, that's here. And then we go down, this time we're going to our f value, we're not going to g, so we're going to f of negative 2. Well, if we go down to the red, then this is what we get. So f of negative 2 is negative 4. And that's your final answer. You don't have to add or subtract or multiply or do anything to that, we're just picking it off the table. So let's do another one. What if you had, let's say they were asking g of f of, let's make it super complicated, 1. So the first thing we do is our f. So we're going to go f of 1. Well, f of 1, let's see, let me pull this over here. So f of 1, if we start at 1 in our x's, that's right here, and then we go down to f, well, that's a 0. So f of 1 is 0. So that 0 is what we're plugging into our next layer out, or our next layer out is a g. So we want g, but we want g of 0. So we take our output, it becomes our input. Now we start up at our table, we go to our 0, which is right here in the middle. But we're going down to our g value, so we're going to go down to the green. Well, the green of that one is negative 4. So g of 0 is negative 4. And then now we're going to plug it into our next level out. Well, that's way out here, right? So now we're going to do g of negative 4. Let me do this in a different color. Da-da-da, let's do green. Okay, now we're doing g of negative 4, because output turns into input. So g of negative 4, we're going to go where our x is a 4, so we find our purple 4, so that's our negative 4, that's here. And then we're going to go down to our g value, which is a 0. So g of negative 4 is just a 0. Oops. 0. And now we're out of function, so that's our final answer. Okay, so you'll notice here that this is a table again, but now our table is vertical. But if you look, so before we had our x in the top and it was all purple, then we had f of x and then we had g of x. So notice x was purple, f was red, g was green. So again, we have x is purple, f is red, g is green, but instead we have the first column is our x, the second column is our f, and the third column is our g. So this is the exact same thing as before, it's just upright instead of laying flat. So if we had, let's say we had pretend this is on your test, And your question says, what's f of negative 2? Well, so we're gonna do the same thing. Our negative 2 is our x value, so that's where we start, right? We're gonna start at the purple. So our purple is our negative 2, and we want f. Well, if you go across there to the red, that means your f is a 12. So f of negative 2 would be a 12. And then you're done. You're just reading the values off the table. We're not multiplying or doing anything else. We're just reading values. So if you have an f of g of 8, for instance, so the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to do your g, because that's the inside one. So our g of 8, we start at 8, then we go across to the green, which is a negative 1. So our g of 8 is a negative 1. That's your output. And then that output is going to get plugged into the next function out. So our next function out, or our next layer, is our f, right? So now we're going to go f of, but we're going to plug this value in instead. So this is f of negative 1. So then we go back to our table. We come up here to a negative 1, that's here. And then we're going to go across to our red, which is 8. So this happens to be 8. So what about g of, let's say g of f of 12. So g of f of 12. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do the inside value first. So f of 12. So we start here at our 12 value. We go to our red. Well, our red in that case is a negative 2. So f of 12 is negative 2. That's our output. We're going to plug that into our next layer out. So our next layer out is a g. So now we're doing g of negative 2. So our g of negative 2, if we start at negative 2 and then we go over to the green, so we're going to start here and we're going to go, our green is an 8. So our f of g of 12 is an 8. Da-da-da. And that's our final value. So on the test, the last one said it had like two things, like f of g of 8 plus g of f of 8, something like that. So let's say that we had, for instance, f of g of 8 plus g of f of 12. Well, we already did f of g of 8, we already did g of f of 12, so all you're going to do is you're going to take the two values that we got, and then you're just going to add them. So our f of g of 8 was 8, so this is 8, and our g of f of 12 was 8, so we do 8 plus 8, so that's just 16. That's all it was. So we're not doing anything wild and crazy, we're just reading it straight off the chart. So I hope that helps.